Rashad Ballard right here, everybody.
At her peak, Ellen DeGeneres was untouchable, the queen of kindness.
So each of you is getting a check for $10,000.
There you go.
A woman whose laughter filled more than 4 million American homes every single day, a number that, at times, outpaced every late-night host on network television. While The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon averaged around 2 million nightly viewers, and The Late Show with Stephen Colbert hovered near 3, Ellen's daytime empire regularly drew twice that audience, with reruns syndicated in over 180 countries. Her 2013 season premiere alone reached 5.3 million viewers, making it the most watched talk show launch since Oprah's farewell tour. She wasn't just a host, she was an institution. Forbes ranked her the 47th most powerful woman in the world, ahead of politicians and CEOs. Her show generated over $80 million a year in ad revenue. Her net worth soared to nearly $500 million, and she accumulated 64 Emmy Awards, more than any other talk show personality in history. Even President Obama awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, calling her an inspiration who reminds us that kindness matters. Ellen was America's moral compass wrapped in a punchline. Yet, just a few years later, that light dimmed. Allegations of a toxic workplace tore down the be-kind empire she had built. And by 2022, the Ellen DeGeneres show was over. To see how fast it turned, rewind to her 2014 Oscars moment, the viral selfie with Bradley Cooper, Meryl Streep, and half of Hollywood. A tweet that broke Twitter records with 3.3 million retweets and 43 million live viewers. America's sweetheart. Fast forward to 2024 when in her Netflix comeback special, she quipped, "I got kicked out of show business for being mean." The laughter sounded different, nervous, almost apologetic. What happened? How does someone go from the face of empathy to the symbol of hypocrisy? Before she became a global brand, Ellen DeGeneres was just a restless kid from Metairie, Louisiana, a place more known for crawfish and hurricanes than comedy legends. Born in 1958 to an insurance salesman and a speech therapist, Ellen grew up middle class but emotionally fractured. When her parents divorced in 1974, 16-year-old Ellen was forced to play adult far too soon, consoling her mother with jokes to fill the silence of a broken home. That silence turned darker when her mother remarried. Ellen later revealed that her stepfather sexually abused her under the guise of medical checks after her mother's breast cancer scare for a teenage girl in 1970s Louisiana. There was no language for that kind of violation. She barricaded her bedroom at night. Years later, in a 2019 interview with David Letterman, she admitted that humor became a shield, a way to control fear. Psychologists might call that trauma-adaptive comedy, transforming pain into performance. After graduating high school, Ellen enrolled at the University of New Orleans. Studying communications, she lasted one semester. By 19, she was painting houses, waiting tables, and bartending. She once joked that she'd taken every bad job possible before finding the worst one, stand-up. But tragedy pushed her forward again. In 1980, her girlfriend, Kat Perkoff, was killed in a car crash. The loss inspired her first great bit, Phone Call to God, a surreal conversation with the Almighty about why bad things happen. It was absurd and devastating, and it changed everything. By 1981, Ellen was performing at Clyde's Comedy Club in New Orleans, where her easy drawl and razor wit set her apart from the aggressive male comics dominating the scene. She had the rhythm of a jazz musician, pauses, punchlines, and a smile that disarmed you just long enough for her to land the truth. In 1984, Showtime named her the funniest person in America. 2 years later, she stood on The Tonight Show stage performing that same phone call to God bit. Johnny Carson laughed so hard he invited her to sit on the couch, a career-making gesture he'd extended to only a handful of comedians. Overnight, Ellen went from local novelty to national name. TV followed guest roles in Duet, Open House, Lauryn Hill, and eventually her own sitcom, Ellen, in 1994, by the mid-90s. She was one of the few openly gay performers on primetime TV, though not yet out herself. Her comedy felt universal, but carried an undercurrent of outsider perspective. Then, in 1997 came the puppy episode. Both Ellen the character and Ellen the comedian said the words, "I'm gay" on national television, the first time a lead character had ever done so. Ratings spiked, but so did backlash. Advertisers fled, religious groups protested, and ABC canceled the show a year later. For many, that would have been the end. For Ellen, it was the intermission. She would return 6 years later, reborn not just as a comedian, but as an idea that kindness could be a career. Ellen DeGeneres didn't rise to the top because she was the funniest person in the room. She rose because she understood the room itself, because she gave America exactly what it needed at a time it didn't know how to ask for it. In the early 2000s, when the country was divided and exhausted, Ellen offered something radical in its simplicity relief. No politics, no cynicism, no late-night snark, just dance breaks, awkward jokes, and the promise that everyone rich poor, gay. Straight deserved to laugh together for 1 hour a day. While other hosts mocked the world, Ellen gave it permission to breathe. That gentleness became her weapon. The Be Kind mantra started as a moral statement and evolved into a business model. The more generous she appeared, the more valuable her brand became. Guests didn't just promote projects on The Ellen Show, they came to be redeemed. Taylor Swift confessed heartbreak. Kevin Hart apologized for the controversy. Politicians came to show they were human. To sit on Ellen's couch was to be forgiven. And the audience loved her for it. She wasn't just interviewing celebrities, she was granting absolution in prime time. Corporations caught on quickly. CoverGirl, American Express, and Apple all partnered with her. Not because she was edgy, but because she was safe and embodiment of goodness that money couldn't buy but could borrow. Her face sold everything from makeup to credit cards. And her Be Kind subscription boxes turned moral virtue into a mail order experience. It was genius marketing empathy, delivered monthly. Her power wasn't only commercial, it was cultural. Ellen had done something no one before her had managed. She made queerness mainstream without making America uncomfortable. When she came out in 1997, the backlash nearly ended her career. A decade later, she was the country's favorite neighbor, married to Portia de Rossi, dancing across the stage in sneakers and jeans. She didn't preach tolerance, she embodied it. She didn't make identity political, she made it familiar. To millions of middle American families. She wasn't the gay talk show host, she was just Ellen, the funny one who danced with kids and gave away cars. But what the audience saw as effortless joy was, in reality, discipline bordering on obsession. Every segment, every reaction, every ounce of cheerfulness was designed, refined, and rehearsed. Staff who worked with her described her as brilliant but exacting, a perfectionist who built a machine of kindness so polished it couldn't afford to break. To keep that illusion alive, there could be no mistakes, no fatigue, no humanity. By 2013, Ellen wasn't simply successful, she was untouchable. She was the emotional center of American pop culture, a billionaire of empathy whose image unified Hollywood, Washington, and suburban living rooms. Her smiling face was stamped onto products, causes, and corporate campaigns, each transaction reinforcing the illusion that kindness could be industrialized, mass-produced, and sold at scale. And for nearly 2 decades, it worked. Her laughter became white noise in millions of homes, a soundtrack to normal life. Yet beneath that comfort, something was shifting. The perfection that made Ellen an icon was becoming a cage. Because when your entire empire rests on being the kindest person alive, even the smallest crack doesn't look like a flaw. It looks like betrayal. But perfection never survives the spotlight for long. The same light that crowned Ellen also began to expose her. The empire she had built on laughter and generosity had grown too big to stay human, too choreographed to stay real. And somewhere between the punchlines and the applause, the warmth that once felt spontaneous started to feel rehearsed. It didn't happen overnight. The fall of Ellen DeGeneres began not with scandal, but with whispers, the kind that hum quietly in the background until they start to echo. For years, her image seemed unshakable. Ellen danced, the audience cheered, and everything sparkled on cue. But behind that glitter, the air was tightening. The earliest signs appeared in 2007. Hollywood was in the middle of a massive writer's strike, and nearly every talk show host stood with their writing teams. Ellen didn't. She kept filming, citing contractual obligations, crossing the picket line while her own writers protested outside. It wasn't a scandal yet, but it was a subtle shift. A moment when Be Kind met Keep Going, and the brand of empathy began to show its first contradiction. A decade later, those cracks deepened. In 2017, she invited Jessica Simpson onto the show and began teasing her about whether she was pregnant. Simpson tried to laugh it off, but Ellen pushed, even pouring her a glass of white wine and nudging her to drink it. The audience laughed. Simpson didn't. Years later, when the clip resurfaced, the tone felt different. What once seemed playful now looked intrusive, as if Ellen's humor had drifted from charm into control. Then came 2019, the year the internet started paying attention. During an interview with Dakota Johnson, Ellen accused her guest of not inviting her to a birthday party. Johnson corrected her gently but firmly. Actually, that's not true. Ellen, you were invited. It lasted only seconds. But the tension was palpable. The crowd laughed. Ellen smiled through it. Yet the clip went viral, a meme, a moment, a mirror, for the first time. Viewers saw behind the timing a host visibly unsettled by being challenged. That same year, Ellen was photographed at a Dallas Cowboys game, sitting beside former President George W. Bush. To her fans, it looked harmless. To critics, it was a contradiction as an openly gay liberal icon laughing with a man whose administration had once fought against marriage equality. When backlash erupted, she doubled down on her philosophy: we're all different, and we need to be kind to everyone. It was meant as compassion, but for many, it sounded tone-deaf, the language of comfort from someone insulated by privilege. And then came 2020, the year that changed everything. From her $90 million Montecito mansion, Ellen filmed her show remotely. joking that quarantine felt like being in jail. It was meant to lighten the mood. But the world was not in the mood. As unemployment soared and hospitals overflowed, the joke landed flat. At the same time, Variety revealed that her longtime production crew had been left unpaid and uninformed, replaced by a cheaper, non-union team. For a show built on generosity, it was a brutal irony. Each incident alone might have been dismissed. A tone-deaf comment, an awkward joke, a misplaced smile, but together, they formed a pattern. The be kind image that once protected her was starting to suffocate her. Inside the studio, staff whispered a phrase that would soon haunt her career. There are two Ellens, one who smiled for the cameras and one who ruled behind them. Psychologists might call it control, a reflex born from trauma, the need to command one's environment to feel safe. But to the public, it began to look like hypocrisy. What once seemed like discipline now looked like domination. The kindness that once felt pure began to seem performative. Still, the laughter continued. The music still played between segments, but something had shifted in the rhythm, a stiffness, a beat too perfect to feel alive. Viewers couldn't name it yet, but they could feel it. The air had changed, the smile had hardened, and soon, the whispers would no longer be whispers. The falling of Ellen started with a tweet. In March 2020, comedian Kevin T. Porter wrote, "Right now, we all need a little kindness." You know, like Ellen DeGeneres always talks about, she's also notoriously one of the meanest people alive. Reply with your craziest Ellen stories. Thousands did. Former staffers, waiters, and assistants replied with anecdotes of cold stares and cruel remarks, the small cuts that hinted at something bigger. The tweet went viral, and suddenly, the Queen of Kindness was trending for the opposite reason. By July, BuzzFeed News dropped 2 reports that tore down her image entirely. Dozens of ex-employees described the Ellen DeGeneres show as toxic, citing racism, bullying, pregnancy firings, and sexual misconduct by senior producers. Some said they were told not to look Ellen in the eye. Others claimed they were fired after taking medical leave. Warner Media opened an investigation. 3 top producers were dismissed. But the damage was already done. For years, Ellen's face had been the brand, and now that brand had become a liability. Ratings plummeted from 2.6 million to under 1 million viewers. Sponsors withdrew, hashtags like Boycott Ellen flooded Twitter, late-night hosts made her the punchline. Ellen apologized on air in September 2020. "I learned that things happened here that never should have happened," she said. "I take that very seriously." But the apology felt rehearsed, too polished to sound sincere. She smiled nervously through the speech, cracked a joke halfway through, and thanked the audience for their patience. The applause was polite, not warm. For years, be kind had been her mantra, her armor, her marketing. Now it sounded hollow. Every viral clip, the awkward interviews, the mean jokes. The silence behind the scenes became part of the prosecution. By 2022, after 19 seasons and more than 300 episodes, the Ellen DeGeneres show ended quietly. Her farewell monologue was calm, tearful, and strangely empty, the sound of someone trying to convince the world, and maybe herself. That kindness had simply gone out of style. When the curtain finally closed on the Ellen DeGeneres show in 2022, Ellen promised it wasn't the end, just a new beginning. "I'm still the same person," she said, smiling faintly. "Just taking a little break." But the world she was returning to had changed. The audience that once adored her now watched with distance. The way people study a monument after the meaning has faded. She tried to rebuild quietly. Therapy, charity appearances, and time away from cameras. In interviews, she spoke about how the backlash devastated her, how it felt like being kicked out of show business for being mean. She revealed new diagnoses: OCD, ADHD, trying, perhaps, to humanize the perfection that had once defined her. But the public's appetite for redemption had moved on. In the age of cancel culture, sincerity was no longer judged by tears, but by timing. In 2024, she returned with a Netflix stand-up special titled For Your Approval. It was meant to be a reintroduction, Ellen unfiltered, older, wiser. Instead, it felt defensive. She joked about the scandal, reading hate tweets aloud to a crowd unsure whether to laugh or cringe. Apparently, she quipped, "I was mean who knew," the line drew applause, but not affection. What was meant as humility sounded like denial. Behind the humor, the wounds lingered. Her attempts at outreach donations to Black Lives Matter, mental health causes, LGBTQ+ youth programs were seen by critics as performative. Each gesture, though genuine in intent, was weighed against years of contradiction. When a brand has traded on goodness for so long, even real kindness starts to look like strategy. The truth was simpler and sadder. Ellen DeGeneres wasn't the villain the internet made her, nor the saint she had once appeared to be. She was a person who built an empire around perfection, then crumbled beneath the pressure to maintain it. The more she tried to explain, the less people wanted to listen. By the time the lights dimmed, the laughter that once filled studios had turned into silence, the kind that follows when an audience doesn't hate you, but no longer believes you. When the cameras finally stopped, Ellen DeGeneres did what few celebrities managed to do: she disappeared. In late 2022, she and her wife, Portia de Rossi, began selling off their California estates and retreated to the English countryside, a sprawling property in the Cotswolds, surrounded by rolling hills and cold rain. "It's peaceful," she told a BBC interviewer. "And maybe that's what I need to be now, quiet." From the outside, her life looked idyllic: horses in the pasture, antique stone walls, long walks under gray skies. But even there, she couldn't escape the echo of her own name. When local floods hit in late 2024, tabloids ran the same old headline, "Ellen's luck runs out." For a woman once defined by omnipresence, anonymity had become its own kind of exile. Her story no longer dominated headlines, but it lingered in conversation, a cautionary tale in every think piece about cancel culture and celebrity empathy. Within Hollywood, the fallout forced production companies to confront long-ignored issues: toxic workplaces, power imbalances, and the illusion of nice culture. Warner Brothers introduced new oversight guidelines. Talk show producers began vetting their staff policies more carefully. The Ellen effect, once a symbol of joy, had become an industry warning label. And yet, her legacy remains complicated. She opened doors for queer representation, humanized LGBTQ+ lives in Middle America, and used her platform to raise millions for charity for 2 decades. She made millions laugh in a world that often needed permission to smile. That part of her story is real, and it endures. But so does the other part, the reminder that kindness, when commodified, is fragile. When it becomes performance, it stops protecting the person who wears it. Ellen DeGeneres didn't just fall from grace. She revealed how thin the line between grace and image can be. The smile that built her empire became the mask that trapped her. And maybe that's the final truth of fame, that in a world obsessed with goodness, the moment you prove you're human, people forget you ever tried to be kind.